This is TWiT.
Vice President Mike Pence has a rabbit. Actually, it's not his rabbit, it's his daughter's rabbit. And its name is Marlon Bundo. And I'm hoping that a lot of our listeners and viewers have been following along with this story as it has unfolded over the week. But on last Sunday's episode of This Week Tonight with John Oliver concluded that the book that Marlon Bundo had published, the actual book that the first book, the original book that purports to have been written by the vice presidential pet, needed a companion volume. I haven't read the original book yet, but we were talking before the show. We presume it has to do with living where the Pences live and what it's like to be a pet of the vice president of the United States. But one thing, and this was almost our tip of the week this week, before we decided to make it one of our more substantively discussed stories. One thing the Pences did not do before they published this book, and by the way, all the proceeds for both of the books that we are going to discuss here today are going to charity. So that one thing they didn't do before deciding, hey, we're going to raise money in this nice way by publishing a vice presidential bunny book, is they did not trademark the bunny's name. And hence we have the rest of our discussion today, because John Oliver decided it would be quite fun to publish his own book, purportedly authored by Marlon Bundo, the vice presidential bunny. And that book took on a quite different theme. Tiffany, can you tell us some more about this?
Sure. So the original book is about a bunny's life in the White House. And the new John Oliver book is about that same bunny, Marlon Bundo, but this time he's gay, falls in love, and ends up getting married. So slightly different plotline there.
Yes, and some pointed digs. I downloaded the audio version, the Audible book of John Oliver's. I'm not sure if that differs, if it's an abridged version of the hard copy, but it is a children's book that that has some wonderful voice talent involved in presenting the audio version of it. And it takes some digs at Vice President Pence just by its subject matter, obviously, and also by at the very beginning when the bunny is sort of setting the stage for who he is and why he's telling his story. He says that his grandpa is Vice President Mike Pence, and that the book isn't going to be about grandpa because grandpa's not very fun at all. So John Oliver clearly is taking trolling to a next level here. And over the week, Tiffany, what has happened with John Oliver's book?
Well, I think it's risen to maybe #1 in the category, something like that. But it's a huge bestseller, very successful. Oh, there it is. And I think it's beating the other Marlon Bundo book, if I'm correct there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so you took a look early on in the week at the legal issues around this. I mentioned that the Pences declined to trademark the vice presidential bunny's name. Probably not something that anybody would have thought to do before our discussion here today and the events of this week. What is the import of that?
Well, it's interesting they didn't trademark the name. I mean, if they had, there could possibly be some legal claim for the Pences against John Oliver and Last Week Tonight. Now, this wouldn't be a very strong argument, but they could technically argue that John Oliver and Last Week Tonight infringed upon their trademark rights by using their trademark in the title of the book, in the book itself, and in the marketing materials surrounding the Last Week Tonight book. But they didn't, so they can't. Your post talked a bit about a potential right of publicity claim. Of course, a bunny can't have a right of publicity claim, but a vice president might be able to, especially because he is mentioned in the book. What do you think about the chances of, well, first of all, of such a claim having any merit, and secondly, about such a claim actually being asserted? So that claim doesn't really have much merit. I mean, Mike Pence is a public figure, and it would be very difficult to prove that they had violated on his right of publicity rights or his, privacy tort-related rights, like presenting him in a false light, or any of the legal issues surrounding, say, defamation. It's a very difficult standard to prove when you have a public figure, and especially because this book is most likely going to be agreed upon to be a parody, right? It's pretty clear this is a parody, and it's pretty clear they're not actually saying anything intentionally negative or trying to prove something negative about Mike Pence, at least not something that's demonstrably false.
Let me kick this to our own Mike, Mike Keys here, and see what you think about the trademark issues and other legal issues involved in this book, Mike.
So it's actually an interesting issue. That the title of the book, the original, is Marlon Bundo's A Day in the Life of the Vice President. So typically, when it comes to registration of book titles, you can't get a trademark registration unless the title is part of a series. So I don't know, maybe there's multiple Marlon Bundo works of authorship out there, but they would have a hard time, I think, getting an actual registration on just the title. Now, if they were using the name for like collateral merchandise and some other things, they could potentially get a registration for Marlon Bundo when it comes to, for use on T-shirts or other types of goods. But even without a registration, setting aside the registration issue, even if you don't have a registration, you can still enforce rights in an unregistered mark. But I agree with Tiffany that at the end of the day, this is a parody, and I think you would ultimately prevail on a parody defense here.
All right, Matt, do you have any thoughts about bunnies and trademarks and dueling books?
So many, but I'll limit it to a few. First of all, if this was the president and not the vice president, we would have already seen the lawsuit in place and many tweets about this. So just a little different character that he's trolling. He should have went after the more responsible person in the White House. But second of all, in copyright law, so it's kind of an interesting analysis that if he wrote it as the vice president under 18 U.S.C. 105 as a federal government employee, he wouldn't have been able to have a copyright on that. It's just probably done in the private sphere in some sense, and I'm not sure what the analysis is there. But is there a similar limitation on government works of trademark? I'm just not aware of that.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, but you're right. There is the provision under the Copyright Act that says that works of the federal government created by federal government employees in the course and scope of their employment are not subject to copyright protection. So, yeah, very, very good point.
Well, I think to be fair, this book was written by Pence's daughter. I think either his daughter or his daughter in conjunction with some other family members. So it's not Pence himself actually sitting down and writing a book about the rabbit.
Yeah.
The Pences actually handled this with some grace. I believe it was Karen Pence who tweeted 2 books for charity, win-win, something along those lines. So they did not express a lot of outrage or consternation about the fact that John Oliver had basically usurped their category for children's bunny books. So that's a good thing.
I think that was a great response on their part. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully that will be that, and that our legal discussions here are purely academic and sort of fun to think about, what must have gone through John Oliver's and his counsel's minds before they actually decided to unleash this book. At least I'm hoping some of these things crossed their minds. Any final thoughts, Mike, about Marlon Bundo?
I guess the only other thing that could act as an impediment had the Pences wanted to try to register the name is the Trademark Office might have rejected an application for Marlon Bundo saying that it's too similar to Marlon Brando. Mm-hmm. That would be a potential basis under the Lanham Act. And I can't remember if Marlon Brando is still alive or not, but and I'm not sure if it matters for purposes of the Lanham Act anyway, but there is a prohibition about registering a name of somebody else, of a famous person, as I recall. So that could have been potentially another stumbling block for them.
Yeah. Stimpy Cat in IRC is speculating on whether a Playboy Bunny book is in the work for other parts of the administration. I guess we'll just have to stay tuned for that. And I wanted to mention the cast of the audiobook, because they really do bring to life John Oliver's book in a pretty impressive way. Jim Parsons, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Jeff Garlin, Ellie Kemper, John Lithgow, Jack McBrayer, and RuPaul. So something fun to do if you're looking to donate to the charities involved with either of these books. The audiobook is only $1.99.